So now let's step back and start to frame this in a business context, right? We all, or many of us, have heard about Conway's Law, right? So what Conway's Law states is that organizations who design systems are constrained to the product designs, which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations, right? So you see, typically what we see is we have some hierarchical structure in organizations, right? You have a CEO, C-suite, their reports, their direct reports, and so on. And if you look off to the left of the diagram, what's happening is that people form a network to get things done, right? So they understand how to work through the system and who they need to talk to, either to get approvals or to find information, and what do they need to do to get things done, right? So this ends up being the matrix part of the organization. A lot of project managers and program managers, even though they wouldn't have direct reports necessarily, they find a way to negotiate and get this work done, right? So it's pretty interesting how it gets done, but it's very siloed and you have to manually break through those silos. So the interesting thing is, and probably an obvious extension to that, is this is exactly how your data and your operating systems are built, right? You end up having siloed sets of information, and you have to know which silo to go to get the information. And if you want to create something new, it usually takes a little bit more effort than you would think, right? So think about the way the information is today. So just break it down. You have Word documents, maybe you have procedures, standard operating procedures, and they're on SharePoint or in Teams. I guess that would still be SharePoint, some wiki, Confluence, wherever it exists, right? Word documents, could be Excel files, could be a bunch of PowerPoint decks, Google Docs, and databases, right? These databases could just be operating databases that you pull data from to get Excel reports, or a more a knowledge base, right? Something that your organization has curated to provide specific knowledge for specific types of tasks, right? So really in this model, you have to know in order to do anything, right? So you have to know where the information is in order to do anything. And so we have to go find the information. If we don't know where it is, we have to know who to go ask. And if you don't know who to go ask, you just don't know what you don't know. So for example, if you're working on something, and this has happened to me, I can't tell you how many times, especially in the consulting world, in a client, you're talking to them about something and they want you to put a talk together for the next 2 days, right? And you're like, okay, cool. So you hunt around in the typical place that your consulting company has their PowerPoint decks, and you can't find what you're looking for. So you spend like however many hours, you're pulling information together, reformatting it, going through all that process, only to find out an hour before the presentation that one of your other peers has already created something almost exactly like what you just did. All you would have had to do is rebrand it, right? So that would be good information to know and be able to get at your fingertips, right? So there's that type of unstructured data. There are also a lot of videos, right? There are videos either internal to the company, or maybe there are some experts in your industry that it'd be nice to have access and understand which YouTube videos to go after, or internal videos in the organization. And then the last thing on here, learning management systems. A lot of companies will have onboarding systems, and they'll be in some sort of learning management library, and you'll go through this training, and that's part of their onboarding process. The best way to think about this information is that how long would it take to onboard somebody new, right? How long would it take for you to explain to them where all the pieces and parts are, right? Because they're so disparate and so dispersed that it's really hard to build the perfect list of where everything is, because it's situational, right? It needs context. And then you can be like, oh, okay, you need these 3 things. And so to spend all that time, it's actually too labor intensive. It doesn't have the payoff, right? You're better off exchanging that information verbally. And so that's what happens, right? And I was at a client, and it was their loan processor. And so obviously one of their key roles is a senior QA loan quality analyst. And I'm talking to him one day, and he's talking about the different types of loans and how they go through analysis. And he was talking about, he said, yeah, we had just way too much work to do. We're going to hire a couple new people. And I'm like, great. So how long does it take to onboard them? And he said, at the beginning, we're very careful. We give them things that are very clear. They can just run through a checklist. And I said, yeah, no, but that didn't answer my question. He started laughing. And he goes, to be honest, to completely feel comfortable, and for me to feel comfortable letting them off on their own, probably about a year and a half. And so you think about that, right? A year and a half. to onboard somebody to your company, that's a long time. Right? But so just think about that while you're thinking about this information and how you would build a knowledge management system, not only for yourself, but how do you increase the onboarding process? So this is a simplistic diagram, and then I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about how exactly you would create a lens for a specific domain. But if you think about the information that you have off onto the right here, you could categorize it all in the category of unstructured data. And so a lot of this information and these processes have been around for a long time, right? There have been things that screen scrape, right? Google uses it, right? There are things that'll go out, and there are crawlers that'll go through your website and pull data. There are things that will go and read PDF files and pull it in, and other technologies like that. And what's happened with this kind of explosion of large language models is that these things are getting a lot more attention, right? Because now everybody's going, hey, what data do we have out there, and how do we go get it? And so OpenAI has some of these things. There's also Hugging Face is a library of different models. And so what happens is you would want to take this unstructured data, get it to some format that you can logically categorize it, and then feed it into the lens, right? And so with the lens concept, now you can discover as you do. Right. So if you've used any of the models, so if you're using ChatGPT, what you've noticed over the last months is that at the beginning it gave you a little bit of information. It was pretty good, but as things have matured, you're getting more and more information. Not only does it answer your question, but then it feeds you a bunch of other information. The other day I was doing something, and it's getting a little geeky, but I was writing a piece of code, and I was like, hey, on this JavaScript thing, how do I do this? And so it came back and it said it, but then it said, but don't forget, you need to add this to the library, and it adds this dependency, and then you're going to need a web server, and blah, blah, blah. So it basically leads me through the rest of the process, right? So now think about that in terms of a lens in your domain, whether it's insurance. Let's take an insurance company, right? Let's say you have somebody that's new to your company, and one of the things that you do is insurance is there's a lot of regulations, there's compliance issues, probably gets into HIPAA, but so there are all these things, and if I'm new to the organization, I may not know how strict that is. And so when I ask a question, if the model's trained the right way, it will say, and by the way, don't forget to do, and basically feed that information to them. And they may not know what it is, but now they have something to go research and to go learn, right? And so from that standpoint, helping them onboard. So you can create AI assistants in creating domain artifacts. And those assistants can do more than just create. And this is one of the reasons I wrote this webinar, was that I see a lot of people using OpenAI or ChatGPT or Claude or whatever to generate information, but there's this huge ability that we're leaving on the table, is that it can actually evaluate what we've built, right? Or you can have it evaluate its own things that it's building, right? So we want to think about the fact that these models can drift. And the reason, and they drift even more if you ask a question, don't provide enough context, and they're looking at the context of the world, right? They have their whole training set, the whole internet that they were trained on, and then now I'm going to ask it a question. So it's going to do a similarity search on that, and then it's going to score the answers based on what it believes is what I'm looking for, right? So all it has is the information that I gave it, right? So it's taking that and trying to build a context. So in some cases, I'll get an answer that may be perfectly correct, but not what I was looking for. So this in AI and in the LLMs, what they call this are hallucinations. So we want to be able to limit the hallucinations or eliminate them, depending on your business. And so we want to think about that, right? So AI can evaluate, and I'm going to talk about this as we go through the workflow at the end. And not only that, but you can build tutors and educates with e-learning, right? There's this, and we'll talk about this a lot more in detail, but you can dynamically build e-learning scenarios based on the context of the type of questions the person is asking, or feed them information that you've already built, right? So you can take things like videos that you currently have in the organization, and using some of these technologies, break it down and identify where the information is in the video. That way you don't have to troll to an hour-long video. You can go right to the point of the video that is pertinent to that topic. And so far, I say studies here, but basically I've been doing surveys, and some of the things that they're finding is this is 10x in employee productivity, right? So maybe a senior level person, they're getting 5 times the benefit, and somebody new is getting 10. So that's huge in a world that we live in today where you just don't have enough time to get your work done.